Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching it from? And what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoyed this story. Now, let the world outside slowly fade away. Let the worries of the day dissolve into the soft glow of your evening, like mist lifting from a quiet valley in the early dawn. You've made it through another day, and you deserve this moment of calm, of stillness, of gentle escape. Wherever you are, curled up in bed, resting on the couch, or simply listening with closed eyes, this is your time. A time to drift into worlds of wonder, where ancient songs are whispered in the wind, and magic still lingers just beneath the surface of everyday life. Breathe in deeply. Let it out slow. You're safe here. Tonight, we journey to a land of green hills and quiet rivers. A place where second breakfasts are still cherished, and pipe smoke curls lazily from round windows set into the hillside. But even in the most peaceful corners of a dull earth, mysteries sleep beneath the soil. Old, forgotten things that stir only when the moon burns red. This is the story of Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. Not a tale of grand battles or distant kingdoms, but one of quiet bravery, of old songs reawakened, and of shadows seen only by those who know how to look closely. As the stars begin to peek through your window, and the hush of night deepens, let this story carry you gently to another place, a place where even the smallest heart can carry the light. Welcome, dear listener. Let us begin. The Shire was known for its serenity, where each day rolled gently into the next, like the soft curve of its hills. Hobbiton bustled only with the simple joys of gardening, cooking, and storytelling under trees. It was in the month of Astron, when spring flowers bloomed and the sky held the scent of growing things, that a change, unseen in 1,000 years, crept upon the land. On an evening like many others, the sky darkened as twilight fell, stars twinkling lazily overhead. But then, slowly, the full moon emerged from behind a veil of clouds, and its usual silver gleam had turned to a haunting red. The hobbits of the Shire, tucked in their round-doored homes, stirred in their sleep. All except for two. Meriadoc Brandybuck, known as Merry, had been out on a late walk, his cloak drawn tightly around him. He had just reached the top of a hill near Bagshot Row when he noticed the odd glow washing over the grass. The usual white-silver hue had turned crimson, casting shadows that flickered and crawled instead of standing still. He squinted upward and gasped. The moon, round and full, shone like a crimson coin hanging low in the heavens. "Strange," he muttered. From behind, a familiar voice broke the silence. "You see it too?" It was Peregrine Took, or Pippin, breathless from running up the hill. He had spotted the change from his window and felt unease claw at his feet until they brought him here. Together they stared at the sky, saying little, letting the quiet of the night stretch around them like a thick cloak. In the eerie light, even the well-known hills seemed taller, sharper, as though they had aged in an instant. Then, beyond the farmlands near the edge of Tookland, they both saw something. Movement, a figure, or perhaps several. They weren't walking, not like hobbits or men do, but gliding, shapes with no substance, blacker than the shadows cast by the moon. Pippin stepped back instinctively, his hand reaching for Merry's arm. "What? What are those?" he whispered. Merry said nothing, but his face paled as one of the shapes turned its head, or what seemed like a head, in their direction. Neither hobbit dared breathe as the figures drifted across the fields, disappearing among tall reeds and hedgerows. They left no tracks, no sound, just the sense of something ancient and wrong passing by. When at last they vanished from sight, Pippin shivered. "I thought things like that were gone," he said, voice thin. "Since the war ended." Merry nodded slowly. "So did I." They hurried back down the hill, choosing to keep what they saw to themselves until morning. Sleep would not come easily. That night, many hobbits tossed and turned in their beds, dreams full of twisting shadows and silent watchers. The red moon glared through every round window, an eye refusing to close. The next morning, the Green Dragon Inn was unusually quiet. Conversation over second breakfast was whispered, and several hobbits mentioned strange dreams or odd lights flickering at the edge of their fields. One farmer swore his prized pumpkins had turned black overnight, soft and crumbling like ash. Another mentioned her chickens had refused to leave their coop. Rumors flitted from one table to another, growing with each retelling, but none dared mention creatures or shadows aloud. Merry and Pippin exchanged glances, then made their way toward Bag End. If anyone would know something about unnatural goings-on, it would be Frodo Baggins. Bag End stood calm and untroubled under the morning sun, though even it seemed slightly dimmer under the red moon's lingering presence, now faded, but still faintly visible behind pale clouds. Frodo was in the study, leafing through one of Bilbo's old journals when they arrived. He looked up, brows raised. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked, before they even spoke. "The moon, the light, and the shadows." That startled both of them. "You knew?" asked Mary Shire. Frodo nodded and closed the book gently. "No, but I felt something. Last night it was like a whisper through the roots of the hill. Something old, something watching." He paused, fingers brushing the leather spine of the journal. "Bilbo wrote about a red moon once. Said Elrond told him of an age long before men, when such a moon signaled the crossing of old boundaries, between what is and what was forgotten." Pippin sat down, his usual brightness dimmed. "We saw them in the fields, shadows moving without sound, watching." Frodo's eyes darkened. "Then it's begun." He opened the journal again and turned to a marked page. There, scrawled in Bilbo's careful script, was a drawing of the red moon above the hills of the Shire, and beside it, sketches of long-robed figures with hollow eyes. "These are the Wayne Walkers," Frodo read, "spirits of the old dark, sealed away before the First Age ended. They seek warmth, memory, life, but cannot claim it unless they are seen. Once seen, they mark the seer and return to them." The room grew still. "So," Mary said slowly, "because we saw them, they'll come back. For us." Frodo closed the book. "Perhaps not only for you. The shadows stir because something has loosened. Something beneath us, beneath the Shire. And if the Wayne Walkers are returning, we may need to act before the seal breaks entirely." He looked out to the window, where sunlight tried weakly to brighten the green hills. "Gandalf would know what to do," Pippin said, hopeful. Frodo shook his head. He's gone east, far beyond our reach for now." A silence settled between them. Then Frodo added, "But Bilbo once left a map of the tunnels and the gate. If we can find it, we might understand what's waking." As they searched the house, the air outside thickened. The birds that usually chirped around the hedges of Bag End were quiet. The bees did not hum over the flowers. By evening, a strange fog crept low over the fields. Not thick enough to hide, but just enough to blur the edges of things. As night approached, the moon rose again, still red. Not as full as the night before, but red just the same. Frodo stood at his window, the map now in his hand, his other hand clutching a small cool stone that had once been part of the file of Galadriel. "Whatever walks here now," he murmured, "is not meant to see daylight. But it walks nonetheless." Beneath the quiet land of the Shire, something ancient stirred. Long coils of forgotten darkness, sealed in stone, began to unfurl, and in the soft soil above, 4 hobbits, small in stature but strong in heart, had unknowingly taken the first step toward confronting it. The red moon, a herald of the old night, watched from above, silent, patient, and unblinking. The fog had not lifted by morning, though the sun tried to pierce through it with a faint golden glow. Instead of dissipating, it clung to the grass like cobwebs, curling around the fences and creeping along the quiet lanes of Hobbiton. Frodo woke early, the chill in the air biting deeper than it should in the gentle month of Astron. The map he'd found the night before lay open on his desk, its corners held down by teacups and riverstones. It was drawn in faded brown ink, etched with Bilbo's unmistakable hand. Neat, swift, with the occasional whimsical note in the margins. But this map did not mark roads or rivers. It showed what lay beneath. Old paths under the Shire, tunnels Bilbo had never spoken of aloud, winding in strange patterns toward a forgotten gate far beneath the hill. The words beside it read, "Sealed with the last light of spring, disturb not the sleeping dark." Pippin arrived not long after sunrise, carrying a fresh loaf of bread and looking like he hadn't slept. "I dreamt of them," he said, quietly setting the loaf down. "Of the Wayne Walkers. They stood at my door, just standing, as if waiting to be let in." Frodo gestured for him to sit. "You're not alone," he replied. "Sam said the same. He's seen them too." Merry arrived soon after, having brought with him the oldest book from Brandy Hall's archives, wrapped in a brown cloth, as though it might shatter under sunlight. Together, they gathered in Frodo's sitting room, the fire lit, though the hour was still early, and the world outside seemed suspended in a breathless stillness. "This book," Mary began, unwrapping it carefully, "mentions something called the Moon Veil, a time when the veil between now and then thins, and the ancient spirits return to places of deep memory." Frodo turned the brittle pages, running his fingers over the script. "Bilbo hinted at something like that," he said softly, "but this is more than just stories. The Wayne Walkers, they were sealed away by elves, long before men even woke in the east. And somehow that seal is weakening." Sam entered then, brushing frost from his sleeves. "Begging your pardon," he said, "but I went to see old Mr. Willow at the edge of Bywater Wood. His well's gone dry overnight, and he says his barn's colder inside than it is out. Something ain't right, Mr. Frodo. Something's coming up from the ground." A hush followed his words, as though the very soil had ears, They spent the day poring over books, maps, and Bilbo's scattered notes. One entry, scrawled hurriedly between lines of a poem, mentioned a tunnel beneath the party tree, long collapsed, but once used by the Fallowhides in the elder days. If the seal lies there, Frodo whispered, then the walkers may already be near, sir. Pippin looked out the window, chewing on the crust of his bread. But why us? He asked suddenly. Why can we see them? Others can't. Frodo hesitated before answering. Because we've touched shadow before. The ring left a mark. Even if it's gone, the memory lingers. And memories are doors, Pippin. Sometimes they open from both sides. That evening, they ventured out to the base of the party tree, the ancient oak now bare of lanterns and laughter. Sam carried a lantern. Frodo held the map. Merry and Pippin bore spades and ropes. The earth beneath the tree was firmer than expected, but they found, just as Bilbo's map promised, a circle of stones, almost like a forgotten well overgrown with moss. Together they began to dig, peeling away decades of soil. As dusk fell and the moon began to rise, still red, though now a thin crescent, they unearthed the rim of a tunnel. The stone was smooth, too smooth for hobbit make, and etched with faint elvish runes that glowed only in moonlight. They lit no fire as they descended, fearing the flame might draw attention from things better left undisturbed. The tunnel sloped downward in a gentle spiral, cool and dry, as though untouched by air for centuries. The deeper they went, the quieter the world above became, until even the rustle of leaves faded into memory. Frodo's lantern flickered faintly, casting long shadows along the carved walls. Symbols danced just beyond the edge of light, trees bending, stars falling, eyes watching. At one point, Sam paused and put a hand to the stone. "It's humming," he said softly. "Like the roots are singing, but I don't like the tune." At last, they reached a chamber. It was small and circular, with a low ceiling and a stone pedestal at its center. Upon it rested a flat disk of glass, ringed with silver cracked in several places. Around it, words circled in Elfish and Westron. "Here lies the veil. Let not the gaze linger, lest that which sleeps awaken." Frodo stepped forward and looked into the glass. For a moment he saw nothing. Then the glass flickered, and within it shadows stirred, slow and ponderous, like creatures waking from a long dream. They had no eyes, but they turned as though aware of his presence. A whisper filled the chamber, not spoken, but felt inside the bones. "You have seen, you are seen." He recoiled, nearly dropping the lantern. The others steadied him, and for a moment, silence reigned again. "The veil's broken," Frodo said. "Cracked, at least. That's why they're leaking through." Merry looked around the room. "Then how do we seal it?" Pippin knelt by the pedestal. "What if this disc was part of the seal? Can it be fixed?" Sam held up a small vial, clear water from the mirror of Galadriel, kept hidden all these years. "Maybe this'll help," he offered. "It holds light and memory. Maybe that's what the seal needs." Frodo nodded slowly. Light to drive back shadow, memory to remind the veil who we are. They poured a single drop onto the disc. It shimmered, pulsing faintly, and for a moment the shadows within recoiled. But only for a moment. Then, a crack splintered down the glass with a sound like thunder and a breath, cold and foul, burst from the pedestal. The lantern went out. In the darkness, something moved. Not seen, but felt. The weight of presence. A hand brushed Frodo's shoulder. He turned, heart pounding, but no one was there. The hobbits scrambled back up the tunnel, breath short, hearts racing. Behind them, the wind began to whisper in a forgotten tongue. When at last they burst into the open air, the night had deepened. The red moon now glowed with full strength again, unnatural and enormous in the sky. The fog was thicker than ever. From the hilltops, they saw movement. Not just one or two figures now, but dozens. Wayne walkers, gliding silently across fields, nearing homes. Frodo looked at the cracked seal in his hand and whispered, "We're running out of time." And somewhere beneath the earth, the shadows laughed, slow and low, like stones grinding in the deep. The sky hung low over the Shire, pressing down with a heaviness that felt unnatural. The red moon, now full and bloated, bathed the land in a dull crimson hue that dimmed lanterns and turned shadows into deeper pools of black. Trees leaned strangely in the windless air as if recoiling from something unseen. Frodo stood on the edge of Bagshot Row, the broken seal in hand, wrapped tightly in cloth. His thoughts were thick with worry, not only for what stirred beneath the ground, but for the folk of the Shire, those still unaware that the veil between the worlds had been pierced. He could feel it now, a pressure at the back of his mind, as though something vast and ancient was watching from behind a curtain, waiting for it to tear wide open. By morning, whispers had begun to spread. Old Boffin claimed to see a tall figure gliding across his field at dawn, leaving no prints on the dew-covered grass. A child from Overhill said her toys had moved on their own during the night, and a baker in Tuckborough swore she heard voices in her cellar chanting in a language older than the hills. Most dismissed these tales as nonsense or dreams stirred up by the moon's strange hue. But those who had walked with Shadow before, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, knew better. They gathered once more in Frodo's study, this time joined by Fatty Bolger, who had taken to researching old tales after his encounter with the Black Riders years ago. He brought with him a scroll, brittle and smelling of mildew, which he spread carefully on the table. "This," Fatty said, tapping the faded script, "speaks of the Wayne Walkers by name. Not as creatures, but as echoes. They're not alive, not truly. They're memories made flesh, remnants of the first darkness, drawn to places thick with life." Frodo studied the scroll. "So they feed on memory, on presence?" Fatty nodded grimly. "Exactly. They can't touch the living unless the veil is thin. And now, with the seal cracked, they've slipped through just enough to whisper. Soon, they'll walk freely unless we find the other seals." Sam straightened in his chair. "Other seals? You mean there's more?" Fatty pulled another sheet from his satchel, this one showing a map much older than Bilbo's. 3 seals were placed in the north, west, and beneath the hill, forming a triangle of sorts to bind the passage. The room fell quiet. Outside, the fog swirled low, hugging the earth like smoke. Pippin stood, moving toward the window. "If we've found the one beneath the hill," he said slowly, "we'll need to find the others before they break too." Merry looked at Frodo, concern etched on his face. "And what happens if they do?" Frodo answered softly, "Then the Wayne Walkers will be free, not just to be seen, but to act." That night, the 4 set out toward the western woods, where one of the seals was rumored to lie. The path was familiar to them, past the Brandywine, through the meadows where they had once hunted for mushrooms, and into the older parts of the forest where even hobbits tread lightly. The forest welcomed them with silence. No birds sang. and no insects stirred. The trees stood like sentinels, their gnarled branches arching overhead to form a canopy that blotted out the stars. Sam held the lantern tightly, its flame flickering more than usual. "Something's wrong with the wind," he muttered. "It's too still." Frodo led the way, following the sketch on the old scroll. They moved carefully, each footstep muffled by a carpet of moss. Pippin tried to whistle once, but the sound came out thin and frightened, swallowed by the trees. Then, without warning, a whisper swept through the leaves. Not from ahead or behind, but from all directions at once. It spoke no word they understood, yet the meaning was clear. "We see you." They quickened their pace. At the heart of the forest, beneath a ring of ancient trees, they found it. A small hollow in the earth, guarded by standing stones, carved with faces long forgotten. The air grew colder as they approached, and shadows seemed to bend unnaturally around the stones. At the center was a raised dais covered in vines. Frodo cleared them away, revealing a second glass disc, unbroken but dim, its silver frame tarnished. "The seal," he whispered, "still intact." But as his fingers brushed its surface, a low vibration trembled through the ground, and the whispers returned, stronger now, louder, insistent. Pippin staggered back. "They're here," he gasped. "They're coming." From the edges of the clearing, figures emerged, not fully formed, more suggestion than shape, like shadows given weight. They did not walk, but glided, arms long and fingers clawed. Their faces were pale masks of memory, hollow-eyed and sorrowful. Frodo stepped forward, holding the seal high. "You are not welcome here," he said, his voice steady. "This land is guarded." The Wayne Walkers did not retreat, but neither did they attack. One extended a hand, palm up, as if offering something unseen, and Frodo saw then, within its translucent hand, a sliver of glass black as obsidian, a piece of the broken seal from the hill. "They want us to return it," he said, "to complete the seal." But their way. Sam pulled Frodo back. "No good ever came from bargains with Shadow," he said firmly. "We seal it our way, or not at all." Mary stepped to the dais and poured another drop of Galadriel's water onto the disc. This time it glowed faintly, not just with light, but with warmth, like a remembered song. The Wayne Walkers recoiled slightly, flickering like dying embers. Frodo placed the unbroken disc into the center of the dais. A ring of light surged outward, lighting the standing stones, pushing the watchers back into the trees. A hum rose in the air, high, clear, and beautiful. The figures howled then, the sound thin and terrible, before melting into the shadows. When the light faded, the disc remained, glowing softly. The whispering ceased. The seal held, but not without cost. Frodo collapsed to his knees, breath shallow. "They touched my thoughts," he said hoarsely. "Showed me things, past battles, lost names. They're not just remnants, they remember who they were. And they hate the world that forgot them." Sam helped him to his feet. "Then we'd best make sure they stay forgotten." Behind them, the forest seemed to breathe again, leaves rustling gently, birds cautiously beginning to sing once more. But the red moon still hung in the sky, and the eastern wind carried a scent of ash and stone. Only one seal remained. and beneath the eastern hills, something was beginning to stir. The dawn brought no comfort. Though the western seal now held firm, the red moon still loomed overhead, unchanging in its eerie glow. As the four hobbits made their way back from the forest, silence clung to the Shire like morning mist. Birds had returned, yes, and the trees no longer creaked under invisible weight. But something deeper still pulsed beneath the soil, an unease that neither sleep nor song could dispel. Frodo walked with eyes heavy and thoughts heavier, clutching the fragment of the broken seal they had recovered. Its sharp black edge seemed to hum when he held it too long, as though it remembered the dark it had once held at bay. They gathered again at Bag End that evening, joined once more by Fatty Bolger, who brought grim news. "The seal to the east," he said quietly, spreading another piece of parchment across Frodo's table, "lies beneath Greenfields, where the hills dip low before the borders near the Northmoors. It was once a watch-hole for the Rangers, before even the War of the Ring." He tapped a point on the map with an ink-stained finger. "The tunnels beneath it were sealed long ago, but if the others are breaking, this one surely teeters on the edge." Pippin let out a long breath. "Do you think something's already come through?" Fatty nodded slowly. "I think it's waiting. The seals don't just break from the outside. They can also rot from within." The journey to Greenfields was slow. The Shire's eastern hills rolled gently beneath the crimson light, casting long shadows that twisted oddly as the hobbits passed. Strange figures sometimes lingered at the edges of their vision, still shapes between the trees or silhouettes atop distant ridges. But whenever they looked directly, there was nothing. Frodo tightened his cloak around his shoulders. "They're watching again," he murmured, "always watching." Sam walked beside him, grip firm on his walking stick. "Let them. If they think they can frighten us off, they'll be disappointed." Merry and Pippin, though lighter of step, held hands near the rear, unwilling to let the creeping dread separate them. When they reached the old watch-hole, it was little more than a mound covered in tangled ivy and roots, its stonework sunken with age. A cracked archway marked the entrance, partially buried, yet the stairs beneath it descended into dry, untouched darkness. Sam lit his lantern and held it forward, revealing carvings along those walls, depictions of rangers standing over kneeling shadows, and 3 circles bound together by a woven braid, the sign of the ancient seals. "It was never meant to be a tomb," Fatty said, his voice low with awe. "It was a vault, a prison." Frodo nodded. "And now we walk into it." When they reached the old watch-hole, it was little more than a mound covered in tangled ivy and roots, its stonework sunken with age. A cracked archway marked the entrance, partially buried, yet the stairs beneath it descended into dry, untouched darkness. Sam lit his lantern and held it forward, revealing carvings along those walls, depictions of rangers standing over kneeling shadows, and 3 circles bound together by a woven braid, the sign of the ancient seals. "It was never meant to be a tomb," Fatty said, his voice low with awe. "It was a vault, a prison." Frodo nodded. "And now we walk into it." The air grew colder with each step. The lantern flickered against damp stone, casting shapes that seemed to lean in, as though the walls themselves were listening. At the base of the steps, the passage widened into a circular chamber, its floor layered with dust untouched by time. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it the 3rd seal, barely glowing, its glass surface cracked like a spider's web. Frodo stepped forward slowly, heart pounding. "It's not broken," he said, voice trembling, "but it's close." He reached into his satchel and pulled out the shard of the broken seal. As he did, a gust of wind surged through the chamber from nowhere, snuffing out the lantern. They stood in complete darkness. For a moment, no one moved, and the silence felt total, until a voice, ancient and cold, echoed softly around them. "You remember our names?" The hobbits froze. The voice wasn't like the Wayne Walkers outside. It was deeper, rooted in stone and sorrow. A shape began to form in the darkness before them, coalescing from shadow and dust. It took the form of a tall figure in tattered robes, its face veiled and shifting. Frodo stepped back, holding the shard high. "Who are you?" The voice replied, "We are those forgotten by the living, denied rest by the silence of memory. You call us Wayne Walkers, but once we were guardian," Merry whispered. "Guardians?" The figure nodded slowly. "We stood where the world frayed. We held the line against the dark before the seals existed. But when your kind turned away from the past, we faded, and the dark reclaimed us. We do not wish to destroy the light. We wish to be remembered by it." Frodo felt the weight of the shard in his hand, its hum turning sorrowful. "Then why haunt us? Why appear in fear and shadow?" The figure lifted an arm, pointing toward the cracked seal. "Because you only listen when the world trembles." The seal pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of pale silver light. Sam stepped beside Frodo. "If you want to be remembered, help us. Tell us how to fix the seal." The figure drifted toward the pedestal. "The seals bind the veils between what is and what was. They must be whole in spirit as well as shape. Each must hold not only glass, but memory, sorrow, sacrifice, and a name." Frodo looked down at the shard, then at the broken seal. He understood. They needed more than pieces of glass and elven water. They needed a story, a soul, to restore the seal's strength. Slowly, he approached the pedestal and placed the shard beside the cracked seal. "I name this place Irerion," Frodo said, voice steady, "for the ranger who held this vault when it fell to ruin. I don't know his tale, but I know his purpose, and I honor it." The chamber shuddered softly. The cracked seal brightened, and slowly the fracture lines began to close, as though drawn together by unseen hands. The robed figure bowed its head. "You have remembered." Then it began to fade, like morning mist under sun. The seal now shone with steady light, pure and silver. The oppressive weight in the air lifted. Sam lit the lantern again. This time, the flame burned bright. As they climbed the stairs, the earth above them no longer groaned. Outside, the hills glowed gently under the moon, which now seemed to waver faintly in its color, less red, more pale. But it had not yet passed. Only now did Frodo realize the truth. Sealing the gates was not enough. The red moon was a sign, not a cause. Something older stirred behind it, something that used memory and sorrow as keys. He looked back toward the hills and whispered, "We've quieted the echoes, but the voice still waits." The others said nothing, but their eyes betrayed the same thought. Their journey home was quiet, but in every shadow they now saw not only threat, but memory. Names half remembered, songs unsung, stories waiting to be told. The final silence had not yet come, but they knew now what must be done. Not to forget, but to remember truly, and that would be their greatest strength. The wind over the fields of the Shire had changed. It no longer howled like a lost spirit, but instead whispered low through the trees, carrying fragments of old songs and distant voices. Frodo felt it in his bones. Something fundamental had shifted. The seal beneath the East Hills had been mended, but its restoration had unveiled a deeper truth. These Wayne Walkers were not mindless shadows, clawing toward the living. They were echoes of forgotten guardians, mourning their loss of place in the world. And now, only one seal remained, the southern threshold near the Brandywine's Bend, where the old burial barrows slept in tangled grass. Frodo sat beneath the party tree that morning, legs tucked beneath him, the wind gently tousling his hair. Beside him, Sam smoked quietly, the sweet scent of pipeweed mingling with the earthy smell of summer soil. Pippin and Merry lay sprawled in the grass nearby, still half asleep after their journey back from Greenfields. Though they had succeeded, none of them felt victorious. "Do you think the last one will speak to us too?" Sam asked suddenly, his voice breaking the calm. Frodo didn't answer right away. He stared at the horizon where the red moon still hung, as if pinned to the sky by some malevolent will. "I think it'll be different," he said, "the final seal. It may hold what even the other shadows fear." Later that afternoon, they gathered again in the circular room of Bag End, maps and a jid scroll spread before them. Fatty Bulger stood at the head of the table, pointing toward the southern marshes. Before the time of the ring, before even the stewards of Gondor took power, this bend in the Brandywine was a place of crossing. Old tombs lie there now, sealed with stones bearing runes no hobbit remembers. Some say they are barrows. Others claim they are merely hills that grew over what once was. Merry frowned. Barrow Downs were east of here, closer to Bree. "Are you saying there's more of them in the south?" Fatty nodded. Some stones sink slowly, others quickly, and some just wait. They set out before dawn the next day, each carrying with them more than packs and tools. They carried weight in their hearts now, the burden of remembrance. The road south wound past farms and sleepy meadows, the land rich with life and laughter. Yet, as they drew closer to the Brandywine's Bend, the landscape grew stiller. Trees leaned low and silent, their branches curling as if whispering secrets to the earth. Mist clung to the river's edge, thick and unmoving. Frodo looked across the water and saw them, low mounds, barely rising above the tall grasses, but arranged with eerie symmetry. No birds sang here. No wind stirred the reeds. The hobbits crossed the narrow wooden bridge and stepped into the silent field. The barrows stood like sleeping giants, draped in fog. Each one bore a stone at its crown, marked with strange looping patterns, some half buried by time. Frodo moved cautiously toward the largest mound, the broken seal heavy in his satchel. As he approached, the air shifted, growing colder, stiller, until even his breath came slow and deliberate. A pulse echoed beneath his feet. Not sound, but memory. Painful, ancient memory. He turned back toward the others, who stood watching, eyes wide. "It's here," he whispered, "and it remembers." They descended a narrow stone stair carved into the side of the mound. Unlike the eastern vault, this place felt untouched by intention. No sigils marked its walls, No carvings told stories of guardianship. Instead, the stone wept moisture, and the silence pressed against them like a wet blanket. Sam's lantern flickered nervously, and Mary's grip on his dagger tightened. At the base of the stairs, they entered a chamber darker than night. A single pedestal stood at its center, and on it a seal lay not broken, but shattered. No light glimmered from it. No hum echoed. Only silence remained. Frodo's stomach sank. Before any of them could speak, the shadows stirred. From the edges of the chamber, shapes began to coalesce. Not the robed figures they had seen before, but thin, slithering tendrils of dark that crawled along the walls like roots. A voice echoed, low, grinding, dissonant. "This one we took." Frodo stepped forward, lifting the broken shard. "Took? You mean the Guardian?" The voice laughed, a sound like dry leaves burning. "There was no Guardian here. Only a gate. Only a door. And now we are through." The shadow forms grew, reaching for the light. Sam stepped protectively in front of Frodo. "We sealed the others. We'll seal this one too." "You sealed memory. But this place was never remembered. It was abandoned, forgotten, and we are what is left when memory dies." Frodo closed his eyes, grasping for something, anything to hold on to. But he felt only dread. No face appeared before them, no sorrowful voice asking to be known. Only hunger remained here, feeding on loss. Merry raised his voice. "There must be something we can give you. Some name, some tale, something to restore the seal." But the shadows laughed again. "Too late. This one cannot be healed. Only replaced. Who among you will offer memory strong enough to bind us again?" The chamber grew colder still. Pippin stepped back, trembling. "What does that mean?" Frodo swallowed hard. "I think someone has to stay. To become the memory. To become the seal." A heavy silence followed. Even the shadows seemed to pause. Fatty shook his head. "No, that's not the way. We can find another." But Sam stepped forward, hand on Frodo's shoulder. "No, we've all come this far, and I won't let you go alone." Frodo turned to him, eyes wide. "Sam, no." "Yes," he said firmly, "but not today. Not if we can help it. We'll find another way." And then something flickered. Not in the chamber, but within Frodo himself. A memory, bright and painful. A time when he had walked into darkness, bearing the ring. A time when Sam had carried him, body and spirit, up Mount Doom. He looked around at his friends, at their tired eyes and trembling hands. He stepped forward and placed the shard on the pedestal. "I name this place Ellenmere," he said quietly, "for those who were forgotten, for those who became dust and silence. I remember you now." The seal did not restore. The shadows did not vanish. But the dark stopped growing. "We hear you," the voice murmured, quieter now. "But memory alone is not enough." The seal pulsed faintly. Then, for a moment, nothing. And then a shape began to take form. A small figure, no taller than a hobbit, cloaked in faded green, eyes glowing with ancient light. It stepped from the shadows, and the others gasped. Frodo stepped back. "Who are you?" The figure bowed its head. "I was the first," it whispered. "The one who stood here before your kind sang songs. My name was taken, but you remembered me, and so I will stand again. The seal brightened, the chamber shook, the shadows recoiled, hissing and shrieking. The pedestal cracked, then sealed again with golden light. The figure stood guard once more, and the darkness withdrew. Slowly, the hobbits climbed the stairs, the weight lifting from their hearts. The red moon above still glowed, but now it flickered. Now it trembled, and they knew one more step remained. The red moon had begun to wane, though its eerie glow still bathed the hills of the Shire in a haunted light. Clouds moved sluggishly across its surface, as though unwilling to obscure the eye that had watched them since the beginning. Frodo stood at the edge of the Brandywine that evening, his feet sinking into the cool, damp earth, the breeze stiff against his face. The others were resting after their return from Elamir, but Frodo could not sleep. Something had changed in the seal when the Shadow Guardian reawakened, something that connected him to the echoes beneath the earth. He could hear the valley breathe now, slow and tired, like an ancient thing on the verge of sleep. And yet, not all dreams bring peace. The next morning, Gandalf arrived. No one had sent for him, no eagle had flown. Yet, the wizard appeared just as dawn touched the green fields, his grey cloak trailing behind him like mist, his staff glowing faintly in the morning dew. Frodo met him at the gate of Bag End, his voice catching in his throat. "We sealed it, but not with power, with memory, Sahid." Gandalf nodded solemnly. "That is often stronger than magic, Frodo Baggins, stronger than steel. But even the deepest memory cannot halt a moon cursed by blood." His eyes turned toward the sky, where the pale red moon lingered above the horizon. The final truth must be faced before the last shadow passes. Inside Bag End, the fellowship of hobbits gathered around Gandalf, like children before a warm fire. Sam brought tea, though his hands trembled as he poured. Pippin fidgeted with his scarf, and Merry tapped his foot on the floor, barely aware he was doing so. "What does it mean?" Pippin asked, not meeting Gandalf's eyes. "Why hasn't the moon returned to normal?" The wizard was quiet for a moment, then spoke. "Because the seals were not meant only to bind the Wayne Walkers. They were meant to protect a place that no longer exists. A chamber lost beneath the Shire, deep under the hill itself. The first stone. The forgotten wound." Frodo leaned forward. "It's here." Gandalf nodded. "And it is waking." It took them a full day to prepare. Tunnels beneath Bag End had long been rumoured to stretch further than the walls suggested, but no one had dared dig too deep. Frodo remembered old stories Bilbo used to tell, half jokes, half warnings, of cellars that vanished into dark places not shown on any map. With Gandalf's help, they moved aside the oldest shelves in the cellar, revealing a low door hidden beneath layers of cobwebs and dust. It opened with a reluctant creak, as though resisting their presence. The air beyond was colder than the grave. Sam lit a lantern. Merry took a breath, and they descended. The tunnel sloped downward far longer than expected. Its walls were smooth, untouched by time or tools, as if formed by will alone. Strange symbols marked the path, curved lines that pulsed faintly, each one older than the next, some barely visible. Frodo's hand brushed one, and he saw a flicker, an image not his own, a circle of robed figures standing in darkness, chanting in voices long extinct. He stumbled, and Gandalf caught his arm. "The stones remember, Frodo," the wizard said gently. "They remember everything." Deeper they went, into silence so complete it pressed against their ears. Even Pippin dared not speak. At last, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern, round with a domed ceiling too high to see, supported by thick stone pillars that glimmered faintly in the lantern light. In the center of the chamber lay a platform of white marble, its surface unbroken, unmarked. Yet from it rose a soft hum, like a breath drawn and held. Gandalf stepped forward and touched the edge of the platform with his staff. The light dimmed. The hum grew louder, and from the darkness, a voice emerged, not spoken, but felt. "You who are not of the first song, why do you seek the forgotten wound?" Frodo stepped forward before he could stop himself. "Because we must," he said. The voice laughed, not cruelly, but with the sorrow of something ancient. "Then you must know the story as we knew it. Sit, listen." And the platform shimmered. Images swirled in the air above them, scenes long buried in time. They saw the earliest days of the Shire, when it was no more than wild hills and forests, untouched by hobbit feet. Beneath the land, a crystal chamber had been carved by beings not of Arda, brought here by the Valar to watch over the balance of things. They were not living nor dead, only memory given shape. The Wain Walkers. "They were not evil," Gandalf murmured. "They were guardians of balance, but when Sauron rose and the world was torn, their purpose faded, and the seals were made to let them rest. But time passed. Hobbits built homes. Paths were paved. The seals weakened, not from malice, but from forgetfulness. Memory crumbled beneath gardens and stories of second breakfasts. And so, on the night the moon bled red, they stirred, not to destroy, but to be remembered once more. We asked only to be seen, to be sung again in the old ways. But you forgot us," the voice whispered. "And now the last stone has cracked. The platform split, revealing a pulsing core beneath, a heart of white fire, flickering like a candle in storm." Frodo stepped closer. "Can we restore it?" he asked. The chamber responded with a soft sigh. "Only by remembrance. Only by song. Who among you will sing the first light?" Silence followed. Pippin's lips parted. "But we don't know those songs." Sam closed his eyes. "No," he said. "But we can give them ours." And slowly, with a trembling voice, he began to hum an old hobbit tune, soft and earthy, the kind sung at harvests and family feasts. Merry joined, then Pippin and Frodo last. Their voices mingled, hesitant but honest. And as they sang, the chamber began to glow, not with the power of ancient magic, but with the warmth of living memory. The seal pulsed gently. Gandalf raised his staff, and the glow condensed into a single point of light that hovered above the platform. The voice returned, gentler now. "We remember, and in you we are remembered." The light sank slowly into the cracked platform, sealing the wound. The hum faded. The air grew still. And above them, high on the surface, the red moon blinked and turned pale. The hobbits stood in silence. Frodo felt tears on his cheeks, though he could not say why. Sam wiped his nose on his sleeve, and Pippin let out a shaky laugh. "Well, but I didn't expect that to work." Gandalf smiled wearily. Memory is the oldest magic, Peregrine took, and perhaps the truest. They began their slow ascent, each step lighter than the last. The sky above was no longer crimson, but golden with dawn, and somewhere in the hills beyond, the wind carried laughter once more. The sky over the Shire gleamed with a warmth untouched by shadow. The red moon, which had loomed so fiercely above them for days, now appeared as a memory, a pale sphere retreating into the soft blue of morning. Birds had returned to the hedges, their songs hesitant at first, as if unsure whether the darkness had truly passed. In Hobbiton, life resumed with a gentleness that felt almost surreal. Yet for Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, the world would never quite be the same. They had walked beneath the earth into the breath of forgotten time and sung the ancient memory back to rest. At Bag End, Frodo stood once more by the round window, watching the sunlight paint the garden in gold. The daisies, which had drooped for days, lifted their faces again. "Do you think they'll sleep now?" he asked softly. Gandalf, seated in the high-backed chair beside the hearth, tapped his pipe against his boot and nodded. "They will rest, not because they were defeated, but because they were seen. There is a kind of peace in remembrance, Frodo Baggins, a kind of truth even older than war." His eyes gleamed beneath the brim of his hat, catching a light not of fire, but of dawn. Sam emerged from the kitchen, a tray in hand, bearing warm scones and clotted cream, as though the last 3 nights had been nothing more than a dream. "I reckon we earned a bit of peace," he said with a grin, setting the tray down, "even if it came with more ghost songs and glowy tunnels than I'd like." Pippin reached for a scone without hesitation. "You know," he said through a mouthful, "I might start a band. Call it the Wayne Walkers. I bet it'd be big in Bree." Merry laughed and nearly choked on his tea. Frodo smiled, though his heart remained heavy, not from fear, but from awe. Later that day, they walked out to the edge of the hill, where the grass still bore traces of the old seal, a pale ring, faint and green-silver in the sunlight. Flowers had begun to bloom along its edge, small wild blossoms that had not been there before. Frodo bent down and touched one, white, star-shaped, with petals like spun glass. "It's beautiful," he murmured. Gandalf, who stood beside him, said, "The Wayne Walkers left this behind, a mark of gratitude. The land remembers them now, and they have no need to linger, not until they are forgotten once more." Sam looked up at the sky. "Then we mustn't forget." As word spread among the other hobbits, tales began to grow. Whispers of lights in the hills, of songs in dreams, of a red moon, and the hobbits who quieted its rage. No one quite understood what had happened, but they knew something had shifted, like the wind changing before a season turns. In taverns and gardens, new songs were sung, songs that blended old harvest tunes with unfamiliar chords, stories of watchers beneath the ground and the bravery of simple folk who dared to remember. The seal remained untouched, a quiet circle of green in a world returned to spring. That evening, Frodo sat alone on the bench outside Bag End, watching the stars appear one by one. The sky was clear now, no red haze, no whisper of ancient voices, only the steady silence of peace. His heart felt light, yet full, like a cup brimming with something he could not name. He remembered the face of the Wayne Walker who had stood before him in the chamber of stone, its eyes not filled with anger but longing. and he thought of how fragile memory could be, how easily even the most wondrous things were forgotten if not carried forward in story and song. Gandalf joined him without a word, settling beside him with a contented sigh. They sat for a time, not needing speech. Then Frodo asked, "Will they ever return?" The wizard was quiet for a moment, then replied, "Perhaps, but not as shadows, not as fear. If they return, it will be in dreams, in music, in moments when the world listens closely. They do not seek power, only place, only remembrance." Frodo nodded. "Then we'll remember. We'll write it down." Gandalf smiled. "That is the task of hobbits, I think. To remember what others forget, and to remind the world that even the smallest voice matters." And so, in the days that followed, Frodo began to write. He wrote not as a hero, nor as one burdened by darkness, but as a witness of the red moon, of the seal in the hill, of the light that pulsed from forgotten stones and the song that calmed the restless deep. He wrote of Sam's courage, of Merry's wit, of Pippin's laughter that pierced even the heaviest gloom. He wrote of Gandalf, who had known the truth long before any of them, and of the voices in the earth that had once been more than shadow. And above all, he wrote to remember, for memory was now their greatest gift and their greatest shield. One morning, weeks later, as summer pressed its warmth into the Shire, Frodo visited Ellenmere alone. The stone remained untouched, the pool clear. The runes no longer glowed, yet they seemed somehow more alive, more peaceful. He sat beside the water and sang, not an ancient song, but one Bilbo used to hum while tending the garden. Simple, joyful, full of quiet love. The wind carried it gently through the trees, and the stone pulsed once, not with power, but with peace. And far above, in the clear sky of a world remembered, the last light of the red moon faded into dawn. And now, the journey comes to an end. The red moon has faded. The shadows have returned to their rest, and peace settles once more over the gentle hills of the Shire. Our hobbit friends have gone back to their gardens and warm hearths, and the seal upon the hill now blooms quietly, say, with silver-petaled flowers, a soft reminder of the memory they chose to protect. You too have walked with them, through deep tunnels of song and silence, through fear and wonder, and finally into a dawn that promises peace. Let the echoes of this tale linger softly in your heart, like the last notes of a lullaby sung from long ago, still carried in the breeze. As you lay your head down and close your eyes, know that this story is now a part of you, not just as a tale told in the quiet of night, but as a gentle reminder that courage can be quiet, and that the smallest light can still guide us through the deepest dark. May the calm of the Shire rest in your chest, steady and warm. And may your dreams be filled with green fields, soft laughter, and the hush of starlit hills. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until we meet again, rest well, dear listener. Sleep soundly, and may the night carry you gently into the morning light.